Avid media files, MXF. Have at it. Go index all those MXF files. So that's what's in the media table of each media indexer. All of those assets technically should be in the Interplay database as well, but on occasion, they're not. So sometimes you have to compare what the Interplay database has for assets and what the media indexer has for assets. You should probably do this maybe once a month, just run a resync. Because there could be potentially media on your ISIS workspace that isn't being accounted for and therefore is taking up some valuable space that nobody even knew existed. It's a bit like going to the attic in your, well, do you have attics? To the attic or to the basement in your house and saying, honey, why are we keeping all this stuff? Can we please throw away this stuff? Which I know we've all been there. So what a resync will do is basically find that media that's sitting there on the workspace. So it is performed to synchronize the Interplay Engine database with the media files that are on shared storage. Since all media deletion is managed through Interplay, the Interplay database must be aware of all the media. How can it ever become unsynchronized? Well, the first one is pretty obvious. If we did a restore from the backup of my database, if I ran that Interplay restore command line functionality and I restored the database, that would be a snapshot of my database from 1 or 2 in the morning. We've been working all day digitizing footage. So my database is not reflecting that anymore. So if you do a restore, you want to do a resync as well. Does that make any sense? Okay, good. What would another reason? Well, you don't have airspeed, but if you were doing ingests from an airspeed, and there was a memory leak on the airspeeds where sometimes it would not check in to the Interplay database. It was a Windows service that would be running. It was called the Interplay Adapter service. And that Interplay Adapter service had a memory leak, and sometimes that service would not actually check in the asset into the Interplay database. So the airspeed created the media on the ISIS workspace, but it did not check the asset in. And what would end up happening a lot of the times is that maybe somebody in the capture room or whoever's running the airspeed, they might just capture to another airspeed and tell the maintenance guy, can you, I don't know, the airspeed, and the maintenance guy might not know enough about resync, but he just might reboot the airspeed or do something like that. And then the next thing you know, that media is sitting on the ISIS workspace and nobody knows about it. So doing a resync would basically, the media indexer knows about it, but the Interplay database doesn't. So it would put it into catalogs, resync, workspace name. And then you could search through it and say, oh, actually, we don't need that, let's delete that. I mentioned this example yesterday. Copying media files at the desktop level. You took your FireWire or USB drive, and you took a bunch of Avid media files, and you just dropped them into the Avid media files folder. Unless you open up a project that's linking to all that media and then check that into Interplay, the indexer knows about it, but the Interplay database doesn't know about it. So a resync will query the media indexer and compare. Okay?
It takes some time.
And it takes some time, yeah. Have you noticed? I don't want to pretend too much. I haven't been on site enough at facilities that have a really full database to see how much it impacts performance of the system. Have you run resyncs often when people are working?
It's pretty slow, yes. We ran it, it's pretty slow.
So everyone starts to complain? Or
No, I start to complain because my machine is doing nothing well. It's supposed to be.
yes. Okay. But you didn't
So I
notice,
take one or two workspaces, resync them, see what happens when I see, and next.
yeah, fine, but, I guess the advice that I'm giving you is about the resync. Sort of, buyer beware, or perform it at your own risk. I'm sure it's fine, but I would not be necessarily running resyncs during the busiest, in the news environment, the busiest time of the day. You might wanna schedule resyncs for a time of the day, when it potentially won't affect the performance of the system. Because if you think you're querying the media indexer, and the media indexer is trying to keep track of all the media that's online for everybody,
Can it be scheduled?
unfortunately. It should be something that goes into, thank you.
Придешь ночью, запустишь.
It should be something, what's, that's scheduled. Oops. Yeah, okay. Anyway, thank you, I'll check it, so, there was mention of this yesterday, but maybe it's good to review it so you know where it is in the book. Sometimes, for whatever reason, clips might be missing their tracks, but I don't like that description. It's corrupt. It doesn't mean it's just missing an audio track or video track. It's a corrupt clip.
Is it came from the old times when each database in local storage has some crack with dots in the beginning that means corrupted?
You mean like the old plus sign too? We used to have a plus at the beginning?
Old databases on local storage.
The MSM, yeah.
MSM, yeah. And some of these folders have files with dots in the beginning, you know.
Yeah, it's that those were corrupt clips. So this is a very similar thing. For whatever reason, if a clip became corrupt, yes, your logic is correct, that the old databases would flag those files as being corrupt. And unfortunately, I forget if it ever moved it into a corrupt media folder, but it would.
Quarantine folder.
Quarantined, yes,
Yeah.
thank you. And
Some of them were in quarantine, some of them were marked with dots.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
getting to be history for me, and I
And it's
forget.
all should be clean for correct work.
Right, so what the media indexer is now doing is a similar performance as what Quarantine does. Is it would put it, this appendix in the front of it, orphan media do not use.
Mhm.
That's good. Yeah, so what it will do is it puts this into the orphan clips folder, resync, and then a workspace name, and then it appends that prefix to the front of it. So I've done this before where I found a few orphan media do not use clips, and I drag them into the source monitor, and you try to play them, and you get an AAF error, which is some type of a metadata issue with the clip. It's corrupt, and I've never been able to get them to work. So you just purge them, that's all. So we showed you how to do this yesterday. You have to highlight the database, you have to be an administrator. If you highlight the database and right-click, if the full menus is on, you have to have full menus on, you get the choice to do a resync. And that's the normal resync folder, and then there's also the one in orphan clips. So corrupt. Great. This is the section yesterday where we talked about importing non-Avid assets. I wouldn't really recommend this workflow, but you can do it. Okay, great. And that's where it's talking about basically that underscore master folder that's on the Interplay Avid WG, that folder becomes full. Okay, so there's some review questions you could look at if you like. So this, we've gotten to module 2 of the book, but believe it or not, we've actually gone through a lot of this. So I'm gonna try to skip through a bit of it. It's supposed to be 4 hours long. I'm not gonna, I hope, spend 4 hours on it. Oh, okay, so forget about this. I'm gonna ignore this. There is a new feature as of version 3. Did anybody ever hear of a product from Avid called Media Manager? It was out in, the Interplay came out in 2006, I think. So from about 2003 to 2006, instead of Interplay, we used another product called Media Manager. People liked Media Manager because it was a very simple workflow. It was a seamless relationship between what was in your bin and what was in the database. If an editor deleted a sequence or a master clip from their bin, the folder in the database, it would delete it. Now, it didn't necessarily delete the media. Instead of an orphan clips folder back then, they had a disassociated media folder. But there was a seamless relationship between the project and what was in the database. Interplay didn't have that relationship when it first came out. As you can see, your workflow is, I've told you, you have to do metadata deletes, and everything then goes to orphan clips. But if an editor within Media Composer deletes a sequence, or deletes a master clip, it does not delete it from the database. Has everybody seen that? Right? So if I delete from the Media Composer application, it does not delete from Access. I have to then delete it from Access. Okay. Now, as of version 3.0, there's a new feature. For those people who complained about this system and said, you know, typically in post facilities, not in news organizations, not in a smaller post facility where you might have individual projects and people are not collaborating so much, and they didn't necessarily have a media manager, they wanted a simpler workflow. So you can do what's called a synced project, which is a new feature, and I have to be completely honest. I've only read about it, what we're reading about here. I have never worked at a facility that has implemented this new workflow. But what it allows you to do is create a folder in the database called synced projects. So if somebody deletes something from Media Composer, it's gone from the database. The users would have read-write delete privileges for their project. Okay, so it's a synced project. So let me show you. Forget about external projects. Synced projects. Advantages and disadvantages. Interplay synced projects provide you with a way to link your bins and projects in the editor with the folder structure for assets stored in your Interplay database. When you make changes in your Media Composer project, the changes are saved to Interplay. So it's a synchronous relationship. Another user can work on the same synced project and update their bins and folders by updating them from Interplay. With the synced bins and media assets folders updated, you can easily collaborate on projects with other users, adding bins and editing media that you can sync through Interplay. When you share a synced project with a user or a group of users, they can access the same synced bins and media you set up from your project. A synced project, so here's your unsynced or your normal projects, and these would be the synced ones. a sync project consists of the Avid editing project on the local machine and an interplay synced project, which consists of a folder hierarchy matching folders and bins in your local project. By default, you create a local project in a folder on your local machine, which is called Avid Synced Project, which is in the same folder as your shared projects. Great. So, advantages and disadvantages. First off, it's saying you have to do this in the interplay administration tool. And again, I have to be completely honest with you guys. I have never worked with this, but I'm just showing it to you. Under synced projects, you can enable it or disable it. If you enable it, then you have the ability to create these synced projects. It might be something that you could test, and you might say, actually, this works so much better for us. But I don't want to be the person that tells you that it's fantastic, because I haven't had much feedback and I haven't worked with it. Well, if you enable synced projects, the advantage is updating and saving a project in Media Composer automatically reflects those changes within the database. So it automatically updates the asset folder in Interplay. When you add a bin to your project, you don't have to check it in. There's this not checking in, it's automatically putting it in the database. So when you add it, corresponding folders are creating in the Interplay database as subfolders within your project automatically. Clips, master clips in your project are checked in automatically, avoiding the need for this unchecked in Avid Assets thing. So it sounds like it could be a wonderful thing. This avoids confusion among editors, okay? Because they're, you know, if somebody makes a change, they see it immediately. However, disadvantages. When you delete an item from a bin, the Interplay asset is deleted. If the clip has no restrictions, so that deleting assets in the project within Media Composer in a synced project allows the same rules or follows the same rules followed when deleting assets from any Interplay project. You cannot remove an item from your bin without also deleting it from the Interplay database. So if you delete it from your bin, you're deleting it from the Interplay database. And users that have been granted too much permission, so, you know, but admittedly, hopefully you have editors that are responsible, that know how to work. But the problem here is when you're working in a huge organization and everybody's sharing the same media, that's where it can become problematic. But you could set up reservations and things like that on specific folders.
Question.
Yeah.
What if we use reserved folders to fill up the bins in sync project, and in the case we are deleting the asset from the bin in the sync project, which has been reserved already in the Interplay, would be in this case?
Yeah, it's a very good question that I don't know the answer to. So how reservations would work. We should probably play around with this and try it. But I haven't personally worked with synced projects. What I'm assuming is, that if you were the user that created the reservation, that you would be able to delete. But if some other user created the reservation, that you wouldn't be able to delete it. So then what does happen? It's a good question.
Значит, надо попробовать, потому что, в принципе, хороший.
Interesting thing, what happens if some media was created within the sync project in Media Composer, and then we move in the access somewhere over normal project.
Now all of a sudden the
access.
guy launches his project and it's gone. That's what I'm thinking. So they would, I could spend time reviewing it, but I have a feeling that this needs to be tested.
Absolutely.
And I am not the expert on synced projects. It's something that's new since 3.0, and the system I was working on was
But
2.7.
too much permissions doesn't sound good for me.
Yeah. But it might be something where if they don't have,
Or maybe extra user for some fast work.
yeah,
Maybe it's okay
yeah.
in some situations.
So, it's okay, I don't have an answer for you on that one, but I would say at least you are aware that this functionality exists, and I would maybe call up your Avid workflow guru, whoever that is, and you know, there are people at Avid that design workflow. Jason Plews is the director of delivery, so he could put you in touch with probably Claire Humphreys, Mark Clouet, who's been here, has Mark been here? Mark Clouet? He does some workflow design.
Great.
Craig Wilson, he's fantastic, Scottish guy.
Yeah.
Have you met Craig? Anyone else? He would be able to tell you this in 2 seconds. Whether or not you understand him is different. Because the Scottish have that, they barely understand what they're saying. It's kind of like a roller coaster. They swallow their words. Anyway,
I think they think almost the same about Americans.
oh, I'm sure, yeah. And that we're loud, okay, which is true. But yeah. Good. All right. So how are we doing so far? Creating a project, I think you know how to do this. Anybody have any issues creating a Media Composer project? Or Newscutter project? Logging into Interplay. Remember yesterday I mentioned that Big Brother is always watching. So it's about to talk about this, so let me show you what it's going to do instead of reading it. If you notice, when I go to import something, I get the choice to import it to some of my ISIS workspaces that are mounted right now, right? So these are my ISIS workspace. Are they available to me to digitize if I have read-write? Yes. Right now, in ISIS, if you were to look at ISIS Connection Manager, you'd be able to see that I have those ISIS workspaces mounted, and that I have read-write privileges to those workspaces. Does everybody see that? Yes? So from ISIS's perspective, my Windows PC is connected, and I have read-write privileges. But Uncle Sam is now watching everything. So if I go into Interplay and if I don't log into Interplay, now Big Brother says, even though you have access, you can read-write at the desktop level, Media Composer is going to lock you out of Interplay. Sorry, of Interplay and of ISIS. So if I want to import something here, because I'm not logged into Interplay, it's not allowing me to create media because Big Brother wants to basically manage all of my media. Does that make any sense? So, fortunately, there's now a new error message with the media creation tool. Has anybody worked with the media creation tool before within Avid? Fortunately, if I'm not logged in, now it creates a message for me. Previously, it didn't. So let's look at what I'm talking about. If I go to Tools, Media Creation, this is where I would set up sort of defaults. I always want my rendered effects to go to the rendered workspace. I always want my ingests, my captures to go to the news workspace. You're setting up a workflow for media creation. It's gonna give me an error message. Which helps. Whereas previously it didn't tell you that. It says you are currently not logged into Interplay. Only local drives will be saved. There was a bug with this that I might explain in a minute. But now, if I go to capture, it's only going to the emptiest local drive, and you can see my ISIS workspaces are all grayed out. Let's see if the bug still exists. Okay, so at the moment, I've been doing a lot of importing. Right now I can't choose my ISIS workspaces, correct? Let's log back in. No, sorry, log back in, Interplay user. And I apologize, you.
That's it.
Maybe, yes,
Yes.
good. Things are getting better here, this is good. Now if I go to media creation, let's say I want, ooh, it looks like it might be fixed. That's good. I want all my captures to go to the capture workspace. I don't know about titles. You want all your titles to go to the capture or general?
General.
General, fine. Okay. Import. Mix down and transcodes. Okay, so we'll hit OK here, right? Just for now. The bug that hopefully may be fixed was that if you had an editor that came in the morning and had their caps lock key held on, something like that, caps lock was on, they go to put their, it's news, very, very busy morning, caps lock is on, they go to put their password in, they go to put their password in. They don't have the patience, and they just say, fuck it, cancel, right? The bug was that even though, so now they can't log into Interplay and it automatically starts creating everything on a local drive. But the bug was that once you realized that, and you logged in correctly, the bug in the past was that even if you had set your media creation settings to go to the correct workspaces, if at once you fucked up, excuse my language, and forced it to go to local drives, the media creation setting would forget what it was previously set to. Does that make any sense? So let's see if the bug is still there. Hey, it remembered. So actually, they're improving. So there is some improvement here. But this was a problem because you'd set up everything targeted workspaces, and then somebody would hit the caps lock and they'd cancel and they would force, or they wouldn't log into Interplay. And now they're creating stuff on their local drive. Or, you see what I'm saying? This is could be a problem. So one thing's been fixed. I like that. So.
Вы же пофиксили эту штуку?
Да. Раньше мы не упоминал, да?
Да у нас половина, помнишь тогда?
Ну да.
Соответственно, в интерплей не заходя, внутри работают, медиакомпозит, нормально.
Все у них работает, да.
Все у них работает.
Maybe capture them. C drive.
Can I give you an example? So at ARD, we had a voiceover that was done right before we had to send it to Cologne. So we had somebody come in the last minute, maybe 2 minutes before we had to send it. And one of the engineers basically did exactly what I'm saying. He hit the cancel, so he didn't log into Interplay. They went into the booth, they used the audio punch-in tool, recorded everything to a USB stick. And then when they went to send to playout, transfer manager doesn't know about that USB stick. It failed. The voiceover was on the USB stick. It couldn't send the voiceover. So it was a real problem. Good. So how we doing here, guys? So everybody's okay except for you, except for your teacher? So the point is, all those drives will be filtered out. Anybody know about site settings, user settings within Media Composer? This is a science in itself.
Yeah, this is
That
we're trying to create our site settings for each machine, for each local machine. But there are some settings, and sometimes we make the defaults. And
yeah, it's not an easy thing. I think a few years ago, when Avid would roll out, for example, at ITV, when I was at ITV, it was before the recession, they would create project and site settings for the customer. But it spent a lot of time tweaking the site settings, and getting everything just right, and then delivering it to the customer. But it's a bit of work to make sure that everything was correct. But yes, you can do it. Have you abandoned doing that? Do you set some site settings?
yeah,
So, what is a site setting? So maybe I can try to explain that. Under settings here, I might have, for example, you mentioned audio. Here's my audio project for the project that I'm currently in called Test User. At the moment, the sample rate is set to 48, format, PCM, 16-bit, etc. Input and output. Right now, I don't have any hardware, so it's 1394. Stereo, etc. I might use a different sample rate or a different audio file format, whatever. I might want to save that as a site setting. So what I could do is go to the special menu here and choose site settings. What does this mean? Well, I could drag over that audio project setting. I might have another setting, like, for example, general, where instead of my timeline always starting at every new sequence that I create starting at 0, I might want my sequences to all start, I don't know what you guys choose, maybe 1 hour or 58:30. Color bars, black, you know, and then my sequence starts at 1 hour. So you might want to have like 58:30 as an example, or whatever. 58:30. Great. Hit OK. That's the setting for this project. But if I drag it over here, now I've created a site setting. What that means is that any new project that I create on this machine, instead of using what was the default, which is 0 hours, it will use that setting. Isn't that exciting? Okay, great. It actually helps, because then you don't have to tweak it for every machine. And then that site setting, you can copy and paste. Unfortunately, that site setting does not live centrally. The site setting is for for the particular PC. So I forget where site settings live now. Is it under public documents? So if you go, oh, you might have to help me here. I think it's under the C drive, and I think it's under users and then public documents.
Do you think it's in the Media Composer folder in the program files? I think,
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it's in a, you're right, it might be under Media Composer program files, and then Avid, and then
Media
Media
Composer,
Composer, and then
and,
sites. I thought it changed though, supporting files.
Supporting files. Site. Settings.
I think it changed.
It was some.
I think,
around here.
go back to you, where would you find the public documents folder? It's usually under users, yeah? So if you get out of here, and,
Users,
yes, and then,
this is,
is this the,
common,
there's nothing that's Avid Media Composer? Sites,
settings, yeah.
there it is.
Yes.
Okay. So that setting, and actually, these are both the same. This Avid video setting, that's the old way of doing it, but it still keeps it. But the newer way in going forward is it's gonna start using XML. So either one of those would work. But if you use the XML setting or the AVS setting, and you then drag that to the same location on every workstation, then every workstation would have that site setting. So far, so good? I succeeded in putting you guys on it. Is today Sunday? Yes.
Sunday.
Sunday, yeah.
Sure, when we just copy these files across all versions.
For each workstation.
So there is no specific import export command inside the Media Composer environment. We may just copy and paste it.
Yes.
Just two units files. Which one?
The most important one is this one here. But,
XML or AVS?
either one. They're both the same, just going forward, they're gonna start, pretty soon that AVS one is gonna go away, and it'll be just XML.
The AVS is 4 kilobytes, XML is 14 kilobytes.
Это же текст. Большой.
But there are other settings that you can manipulate in here. Yeah, and it gets real complicated. There is a document that is old at this point, but I have it, and I can grab it and send it to you guys. It's an internal Avid document, and it's called Site Settings and You. And it does talk about, because it's kind of complicated, what's in these default prefs. So I'll see if I can send it to you guys if you want to start to tweak your systems a bit. So,
Site settings for dummies.
yeah, because it is a little bit complicated. Have you heard of this one? The resolution one, what is it called?
Disabled resolution.
Disabled-
Yes.
Disabled underscore res text file.
Disabled res, yes, text files with the list of resolutions.
Yes, so you can Google this, so it's an easy fix. But if you wanted to Google it, you can just Google the word Avid disabled res. Why am I mentioning it? You might already have done it. Well, we only have FireWire here, so we don't. Has anybody ever used Final Cut Pro or even Avid now with a Blackmagic or an AJA card? When you go to capture, don't you have a lot of choices? as far as, right now I don't have a breakout box, but you can see all the choices I have here for potential codec. I love editors, editors are great. But potentially they could choose the wrong resolution here. And then my playout server might not work. It might not send to playout. So there's a text file that you can just drop at the root level of the Avid Media Composer folder. It's just a text document called disabled_res.txt. And you just literally put in text the resolutions that you don't want to show up as a choice. And then you could literally just maybe have 1 or 2 resolutions that the editor can choose. And it's easily found, you can Google it, but it's a great way to prevent editors from making mistakes. So you have it installed. Okay, good. And this doesn't have internet access, right? So you could,
We have on this machine.
maybe during a break, if you want, we can Google it. It's available in the Avid knowledge base how to do it. Okay. Good. I think we've gone over these settings. You have to put in the Interplay server. You have to log into the Interplay server. And you have to set your default folder path. Now, there's a couple of different options. When you go to Media Composer, oops, wrong one. So this button, do you see what goes away here? It's called Append Project to Directory Path. You see that thing that says project goes away. What's the name of my project? Test User. It's a strange name for the project, but the name of the project is Test User. When I check in, right now, because that is ticked, it creates a project. It creates a folder called Test User. And then folders for all of my bins. If you don't have that ticked, it won't create that separate folder. It's up to you. Most people have it ticked so that they know what the name of the project is in the database. This one, Verify Directory Path. Personally, I like it like this. On login. So that every time an Interplay user logs in, it comes up with the window that says, where are you checking into? What's your path? So it comes up with this window. Are you going to the right location when I log in? Some people like it to be for new projects only. Force selection of directory path. Or on first check-in. The first time they go to check in something, it prompts them, are you checking this into the right location? Do you remember yesterday I created the folder with no security privileges on that folder at all, and that forced the user, hey, you checked into a place, you never checked this. Because they tend to ignore this. Even if it pops up, they ignore it, and they just, are you having that problem here? Do they always check into the wrong place, or do they check into the correct place?
Файлики я как
Они просто об этом появился и ссылки он им потом ладно, это принимать будет.
I usually do this with transcode. So, you guys have the Media Services Engine. Remember I mentioned it downstairs. What is the Media Services Engine? It's a broker. Used to be called DMS, Distributed Media Services. So what is a broker? You might be wanting to rent an apartment. You might have an apartment that you want to rent. I'm the broker. Okay, you come to me. Do you have any apartments? Yes. I've got this guy. I'm the middleman. The user is, you have to set up within Media Composer. If you're going to be using a media services engine, you have to put that server name in there. The broker has to be able to log in to Interplay because he might need to check in assets. What would be one example? The media services engine there's the Interplay copy service, there's the Interplay move service, there's the Interplay transcode service. There is the well, let's say transcode. You might, as an editor, might want to highlight a master clip and choose to transcode that from one resolution to another. You could rather do that, rather than doing that within Media Composer and having the progress, transcode, happening from the Media Composer application, instead of slowing down Media Composer, you could send that transcode to the server. Why have the Media Composer be hung up doing this transcode? Send it to the Media Services engine, and then you can keep working. But the Media Services engine needs to be able to log into Interplay to be able to update the assets within the database that it's at multiple resolutions. So what I'm getting at is, if I go in here and I go to Media Services, at the moment, this Media Services engine has not been set up on this one particular PC because you're probably not using that functionality on this Media Composer. So if I show you, for example, this sequence, under the hamburger menu, at the moment, if I select it, or even right-click on it, there is no choice here under Send To. So there's no Send To Media Services right now to send the sequence to have the Media Services engine do something with it. For example, move. So what I'm going to do, I actually usually do this with the transcode. So let's find out what happens with move. If I put in the engine name, what's the host name? That's the
I
end.
think with the,
I don't think you know the domain.
no, not the name.
With a dot. And then, what, do you know what the username is that you use? I could just put an administrator if you'd like, but do you know what the password and username
Of username, which one?
for Media Services?
Okay, let's see.
Let's see, you might have one already here.
I think it's a, IP admin.
Okay. So let's look under everyone. Is there anything for Media Manager there? Media Services.
No, I think it's IP admin.
Okay.
No, it
Let me try it. Yeah. If it doesn't work, we can move on. We don't have to. And then you have to tick the box at the top. Yeah. Okay. Let's just try administrator then. Try the administrator user. So just try administrator and then password. Okay, so that, hopefully, we'll see. What that now allows is the Media Composer to communicate to the Media Services engine. If you had other services installed, like Interplay Transcode, you could install that on another server, and you could start doing background transcodes, as an example, or mixdowns. If you had transcode installed, you wanted to do video and audio mixdown, you mentioned that the other day, you could have your sequence do the mixdown in the background, and you could keep working, just as an example. If you highlight this, and then you right-click,
Media services.
there's Media Services. And this is showing, now he's communicating to the Media Services engine, and these are the profiles, these are the services that are already running. The Interplay Archive service, the Interplay Copy service,
Конечно, ничего из этого не было.
Interplay Delivery service, the Interplay Restore service,
No move.
Hmm?
No move service.
no move service. Yeah. So what we can
Сервисов
do,
у нас только есть Move сервис, но его в этом списке нет.
so if we remote into
Move server.
the, actually, we don't need to remote, we should be able to, let's see what's running on,
It's
on,
only move service.
that's it, right?
Yes, that's it.
So let's do something
We
real
can say
quick.
from administrator,
Um,
media services.
And your providers, yeah, so you've only got move service, that's interesting, so move is not a choice, and you have
Only move.
your profiles here, but you do have,
We have profiles for only for move.
yeah,
These are from nearline and back. To nearline, back to near.
so why, let's just do something, sometimes this helps if I do, okay, I've never done it with move. I've done it with transcode, but sometimes maybe it's the user, but let's toggle off, hit okay. Toggle it back on. Because you typically would see the profiles that you've set up.
What editor can move from Media Composer? Why should he need it?
If you wanted to take a sequence and have an editor perform the move to the ISIS 2500.
You can perform it
So you set up a watch folder, or did you,
No. Just right click it and move.
yeah, so from Access you can do it. So, let's see, did I turn it on here? Highlight? Is it a right click or a left? So it's a right click. Left, right click. Yeah, so it's not showing up there as move.
There's
So
no such ability like move from the Media Composer.
there is transcode from Media Composer, but there's not move, I guess, you're right. And do you have an auto move folder set up in any of your projects or anything like that? So if I create a new project, a new folder, you might not have that installed. Move stuff. I'll get rid of it after. So yeah. So which one would you want me to choose? Anything in particular? To ISIS?
This is kind of push folder.
Yes, exactly.
So anything that goes in this folder will move.
Yeah, it should.
Sure.
I'm used to doing this with auto transcode, but typically you see how you have these choices here?
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Say photo mode, we don't put photo mode.
So what you can install is there's another service that you install that allows for you to set up an auto transcode folder, for example. And this service is currently not running, but you have to install it from the installers folder. There's an option that would allow you to set up auto transcode, and you would install that, and then you then create a watch folder, basically, within the database.
Does it require some extra license for auto mode?
That I don't know. Let's see, move. So I can use that profile, but it's not allowing me to do it, is it?
Sales guy.
Yeah. The profile is set to use a destination workspace, which is no longer exists. So let's choose another profile. Which one would be good, do you think?
Зачем он может понадобиться автоматический транспорт?
Нет,
Может быть, транспорт.
автоматический транскод.
Понятно, когда вы сделали мастера, вы его хотите транскодировать для подэфира. Ну или еще куда-то.
How about this one here?
Должно запускать некую цепочку событий.
Ну,
Там,
мало ли,
транскодирование, потом
Может, наружу куда-нибудь
архивирование.
надо отдать какую-то форму.
Ну, для этого, соответственно, ты какой-то пресет делаешь отдельно. И в эту папку, условно говоря, для нее кидаешь просто там все, и он начинает автоматом, по идее, транскодировать. Но не может это каким-то образом ошибку выдавать, то, что бэкграунд-сервис, ну, я остановил, в стопе находится.
So it doesn't look like, I think you have to install that background service. Yeah.
That's dependence from the local service.
What's that?
Local media computers control service.
No, no.
Не связано.
No, what this is doing is it's, if you set up this, this auto transcode, if you, for example, a transcode, what you have to do is you have to install, let me show you,
Транскод сервис – это отдельный сервер с сервисом.
So
This is a standalone server.
yeah.
У нас его нету.
Typically, okay, so you can have, you can have,
обычно это отдельный сервис, потому что в списке приложений он идет отдельным сервисом, там, к нему бэкап-сервис и так далее.
Есть транскод сервер and STP encode сервер.
yes, so you can have a separate server that's running the transcode service. So your media services engine would need to communicate to the transcode
This
service.
standalone server
Standalone
with
service. It's a physical server
Yeah.
running the service. However, you can get away with, on the same server, running the transcode service. Avid will support that, so that the DMS broker communicates to the service. And it's all running, so you don't have to have a separate server. But Avid will only support one service running on the broker. So at this point in time, do you have this? Right now, you probably have this, right? Two separate servers? Yeah. You could technically run up to one service on the same
DMS,
media services engine, sorry.
we have media services and on machine.
You do. So media services is here as well, yeah. So you have one service, up to one service running on the broker. If you wanted to run any other service like transcode, all you'd have to do is install that transcode service on any of your other machines. And as long as it's not taking up too much CPU utilization, you could get the broker to communicate with that. However, if you wanted to set up a watch folder it's a separate installation. There's two services. There's the transcode service, and there's the auto transcode service. So the auto transcode service just is, all it's doing is monitoring the folder. If something ends up in that folder, the auto transcode service will then talk to the transcode service. So it's two separate services. One that's monitoring the folder, and one that's actually doing the transcode. Does that make any sense? So if I was to show you from the installer, where are your installers? Is there installers on these internal? Луки.
Можешь посмотреть на локальном диске, у меня же это интерплей там скидывал там на диске C в инсталлерах.
Здесь Interplay клиент,
That's clients.
Нужен серверный, наверное, да.
Need the server, yeah. It's huge, so I should probably VNC because it's a big. It's like six. It's like six.
installers, you wanna run it?
Yeah, just to show, maybe to show. You probably want a VNC because otherwise,
To the IDE.
to whatever server has the server installer.
You like the install?
I would like to just. Do you think these guys are ever going to be installing these services? Yeah. If you could VNC into the server that has this,
Вот офигеть нашел белого.
the one that actually has the installers on it.
Сознался, залетел.
В смысле?
На мыть куда-то заливаешь, может, совершенно неправильно. Затем выкручиваем, создался.
У нас на первом или на втором?
На первом.
I don't have to do it, I was just letting.
Ну, что, хочешь проинсталлировать на луке?
Не знаю.
Нет, выше. Поздний.
So, server.
Интерплей. И носи.
Just do the auto run.
Инсталлерс. Инсталлерс.
So, yeah, so, just, this is way off on a tangent, but you have a couple of different installers here. If you go to servers, under media services, you can install the broker, and then I always forget which one it's under here. But if you go to WAN support, yes, it's not in here. So you go to local workflow support.
Ну, вот понятно, что он недостаточно может.
If you're installing transcode as an example, you have to install the transcode. If you want to set up a watch folder on an Interplay folder, you have to install this one.
There is nothing about move, so we cannot make automatic moves.
Yeah, I guess not.
Ну, нам лицензия нужна, во-первых.
You external license for it.
Maybe need
Or
a
not.
license for transport.
There's just move, but there's not auto. Yeah. I wonder why that is. I didn't realize that. There's auto copy, there's auto transfer, but there's not auto move.
We have one editor who very often takes a lot of place and move it. Well,
Okay, so this is another question. So, yeah, so why isn't there an auto move? Because there is everything else that you can set up a watch folder for, which I've done. It does take a while, and it's a live system, so I don't wanna do it here. But usually in the 433 class, the 5-day week, in the 5-day class, we set up the media services engine, we set up the transcode service, and then we set it up so you do it manually. Great, I can do it through Media Composer, I can have this transcode happen in the background through Media Composer. If I wanna set up a watch folder, I have to install a second service, which is, for example, auto transcode. But I didn't realize that there wasn't an auto. I've never used it, but you have to with ISIS 2500. You can play with it.
Ну чего?
Записал себе.
Записал вопрос.
Я думаю, что надо с фикс-листов. Нету чего.
Автомобиль. Есть оператора, всякое.
Нет, это я видел.
Вот автомобиль где-то потерял.
Ничего не видел.
Рабочая система.
Да.
So it's just 1 o'clock.
Индусы пишут каждые полгода новый релиз.
What time do you guys want to go to today?
Что-то фиксят.
What time do you want to break
Один
for lunch?
фикс делают, добавляют.
Когда на ланч?
Да может быть сейчас прерваться.
I think today it's right.
О, может быть есть смысл до КФС дойти, около Рижской, там купить.
Right now, maybe.
Good time?
Good time.
Okay.
Lunch будет, right? Right?
Okay, let's break for lunch then. And then when we come back, we've already spoken a little bit about dynamic relink. There's some capture settings in here that we can speak about. Media creation, we've already spoken a little bit about. Transfer, we haven't spoken about yet. I don't know if you have that set up on your Media Exposer clients.
On particular this one, I'm not sure, but on the others.
We talked a little bit already about this interplay window. We have a couple of things in here where we can show how you can set up reference clips within the interplay window. So I talked about it within Media Composer, and within Access, but you can do the same thing here within the interplay window within Media Composer. Yeah, so there's a few things here that when we come back, we'll go over. I've already gone into that a few times. Checking out a sequence, we'll talk about. The fact that you can capture directly to an interplay folder. Rather than capturing to a bin, you can capture directly to an interplay folder. This is Media Composer 101 stuff, so I don't feel like I need to show you this. And then iNews. If you don't have iNews, I'm going to skip over this section.
Yeah, we could skip it.
You can skip all of this. So when we come back, hopefully we'll finish this chapter, and then we'll see where we're at. This is a common mistake that if people are changing the name of a master clip, both of you have changed the name of the clip, and then you go to check in,
In the same folder.
the interplay says, what do you want me to do? You've both changed the same asset. And it asks you basically, okay, if a user has he can change several properties. If a user tries to change a writable property that both people are accessing it at the same time, basically, what do you want me to do? So the server says, you know, do you want me to keep the original name, your change, or what's currently on the server? So, okay, yeah. I think, personally, we have plenty of things to keep going through. Let's break for lunch. And maybe we'll have a renewed spirit after eating.
Oh.
So it's 1 o'clock, let's do it. Let's break. Thank you guys for your patience. I know it's a lot of just me talking.